Hello my wonderful friends, it's Evelyn here and welcome back to this, my very own little creative corner of the internet. Please, if you haven't done so already, hit that all important subscribe button for me. It lets me know that you're all there. Now my friends, yes, spring is still here apparently, so I'm going to be doing a lot more videos, at least their intros, from this gorgeous garden of mine. Feeling very grateful for that, my friends. So as promised last week, my friends, I'm getting back to some vintage sewing this week, and I'm going to begin by raiding the pattern stash. So this week we're going to be creating an authentic vintage 1970s pattern. This one, it's a Simplicity 6560. Now my friends, although spring looks as though it might be here in the Scottish Highlands, the weather can be very changeable. So I'm thinking about creating the short sleeved version, the version here, version 2, my friends, because it could be a great spring or summer wear, but I could also use it as a layering piece too. So there's method to the madness, my friends. And for fabric, I'm going to use the remaining fabric left over from my recent Christmas dress. I'll pop a little picture here and a card above to that too. But without further ado, let's get to some sewing, hopefully for spring. Fingers crossed. Worse things have happened, my friends. Crazier things have indeed happened. Let's hope spring's actually here. Let's get to some sewing. This week's Simplicity pattern is a true vintage one from 1974. A shirt dress in 2 lengths, the bodice has a shirt style collar and is gathered into a skirt which is made of 3 simple rectangle pieces. With a back yoke and front waist tie, the bodice has 2 sleeve options too, a short cuffed sleeve and a longer gathered cuffed sleeve. Being a 70s pattern, this pattern is just a single size, on this occasion a 38-inch bust. Now this pattern is bigger than my body measurements for my waist, but the bust and hips are pretty much spot on, and since it has a tie at the waist, I'm not too concerned about the size discrepancy. So grabbing the leftover fabric from my Christmas dress, it's time to get to cutting out those pieces. And I've really been favouring my pinking shears of late for this task. Pieces all cut out, my first sewing task was to stay stitch necklines, stitch gathering stitches on bodice pieces, and finish the facing edge of the front pieces by pressing them in 1/4 of an inch and top stitching in place. Then it was time for one of my favourite sewing methodologies, batch pinning and sewing. On this occasion, this meant the skirt seams at sides and centre front, sleeve seams, and joining the 3 back bodice pieces. Then constructing those waist ties. This is one of my favourite ways to sew garments, as it helps me see results relatively quickly, keeping me motivated. But my friends, be certain that you've thoroughly read instructions for your chosen pattern, because batch sewing in this way can lead to missing steps. So be sure to read those directions, because nobody wants an afternoon with a stitch ripper. Next, it was time to assemble the collar, being sure to trim and grade seam allowances for nice clean edges when that collar gets turned out. Now here, my friends, is another reason to carefully read instructions. I noticed that the waist ties weren't incorporated into the bodice side seams. Instead, they were sewn to the outside of the bodice once it had been constructed. Oh no, my friends, I could not have a messy outer bodice, so those ties got sandwiched into the side seams, which incidentally, along with the shoulder seams, was my next sewing task. That collar was then pinned around the neckline, leaving one edge of the collar open to either hand finish or top stitch later, concealing the neckline seam allowances inside. My next task was to trim the edges of the centre front of the skirt in bias tape. At this point, I was a little bit, at how this dress was constructed and sewn. My little mind was screaming at me that a button front skirt would be much more appealing, but I was determined to see this through. Time to insert those sleeves, and then join the bodice to the skirt all around the waistline. The instructions then directed me to add elastic along the front waistlines of the skirt. Having had a look at my current dress, my friends, I'd become rather aware that it was on the big side, so instead of just placing elastic at the front, I decided to cut a piece of elastic that fits snugly around my waist all along the waistline seam allowance, just like so. Finishing that collar was next. Before buttons and buttonholes, one of my favourite steps now that I've finally become friends with the one-step buttonhole function on my Netchi digital machine. Well, my friends, I am really pleased with how this 70s shirt dress turned out. However, there are definitely some things that I would change if I created this pattern again. Yes, it's a little on the big side, my friends, and I really am not too sure about how that skirt is constructed. I'd much rather keep that button front closure going down the centre front seam instead, so that will definitely be one adaptation I make to this pattern when I make it again. And the shoulder seams are a little long for me, meaning that the sleeves actually come past my shoulder point. So that's definitely another adaptation I will make to this pattern. But overall, I really love this shirt dress, and it's going to be a great springtime staple, I hope. I really wish though that I'd made a mock-up of this beforehand. I might even just take those sleeves off and reattach them, taking a little off at the shoulder seam. Who knows, my friends? But there we have it. You win some, you lose some. But until next week, my friends, take care and stay safe. I'll see you then. Bye.